Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something a lot of you have been asking about, building a successful survivalist community. We've got some really thought-provoking articles and blog posts here.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is they really push back on that whole lone wolf stereotype.
Right, like ditch the image of the guy all alone in the woods with his stockpile. It's not about that at all.
Not at all. Comment bâtir une communauté de survie is a great example. They make a strong case that community is absolutely key.
It makes you wonder, though, doesn't it? Like, why is that so important?
Well, think about it this way. Our ancestors survived because they worked together. They formed tribes, shared the workload.
Yeah, that makes sense. Pilier du survivalisme was saying something similar about collective strength being the key.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical safety either. Think about the emotional support. A group can really help you cope with stress and anxiety.
Right, because facing a crisis alone, that's going to be way tougher than having people to lean on, definitely. And comment bâtir une communauté de survie also pointed out the practical benefits, like sharing resources.
Oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Instead of everyone hoarding their own supplies, you can pool everything and make it go further.
Right. Community gardens, shared food preservation techniques. It's about maximizing what you have.
And then there's the whole thing about different skills, right? You're not going to be good at everything.
Absolutely. Having people with diverse skills makes the entire community more resilient. A mechanic, a doctor, a gardener. Each person brings something valuable.
Okay, but what about location? I mean, wouldn't being closer to a town, even with the risks, give you more options? Piliers du survivalisme seem to think being secluded was the way to go.
That's the classic dilemma, isn't it? Seclusion versus proximity. It's the tough call.
It sounds like it's all about weighing those trade-offs carefully.
Exactly. And that's where having those specialized roles comes in piliers du survivalisme. Suggested having a designated guardian, someone always watching out for danger.
So it's not just about hunkering down, it's about actively protecting the community.
Right. And they also talked about the importance of a medic, someone who can handle medical emergencies and keep everyone healthy.
Okay. I'm seeing how crucial that would be, especially if you're far from any hospitals or clinics.
Exactly. And then you have the artisan, the person who can build and repair things when you can't just run to the store.
That makes a lot of sense, especially if supply chains break down. You're going to need someone who can think outside the box.
Absolutely. Resourcefulness and creativity are key. And of course, you can't forget about food.
Right. Comment bâtir une communauté de survie seem to really emphasize sustainable food practices.
Yeah, hunters and farmers are essential. They're the ones ensuring the community has enough to eat, whether it's through hunting, fishing, or gardening.
Because it's like a whole ecosystem, right? Each role is interconnected and supports the others.
Exactly. A well-rounded community needs all those pieces to function effectively.
But even with all that, wouldn't communication be a huge challenge? Especially if you're spread out or if something happens to the group.
Piliers du survivalisme stress that communication is key. In a crisis, it can literally be the difference between life and death.
So what do you do if cell phones and the internet are down?
Well, for short-range communication, two-way radios are a good option. Easy to use and reliable.
Ah, the classic walkie-talkie. Always a good backup.
For sure. But for longer distances, Piliers du survivalisme recommends signal flares or mirrors.
Okay, I can see how those would come in handy if you need to signal for help.
Exactly. They can be seen for miles. And they also suggested having some low-tech analog methods as a backup, like sound signals or color codes.
That's smart. Having those prearranged signals could be a lifesaver if technology fails.
And to practice all these skills, Comment bâtir une communauté de survie had some really interesting suggestions for team-building activities.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about that. It sounds like they were suggesting some fun stuff, actually.
Right, like camping, a classic way to test your wilderness survival skills and bond as a group.
Plus, who doesn't love a good campfire? And I think they mentioned paintball, too.
Yeah. It might sound a little strange, but it's actually a great way to practice tactical skills and communication under pressure.
So you're running around dodging paintballs, making decisions on the fly. It kind of sounds like a fun way to prep for a crisis.
Exactly. It gets the adrenaline pumping. And then there's Capture the Flag, another classic that encourages teamwork and problem solving.
It's amazing how those simple games can teach you valuable skills without even realizing it.
And Comment bâtir une communauté de survie also highlighted the importance of formal training, like first aid and wilderness survival courses.
Right. Having that solid foundation of knowledge is crucial. It's not just about instinct and intuition.
You need both. The training gives you the tools, and the team-building activities put those tools to the test.
Okay, so we've got the skills, the communication, the team building. But what about the people themselves? How do you know who's going to be a good fit for a survivalist community?
Renforcer le lien social goes into detail about the qualities to look for, and it goes beyond just practical skills.
So it's not just about finding the best fire starter or the most skilled hunter.
Nope. Renforcer le lien social says reliability is absolutely essential. You need people you can depend on who will follow through on their commitments.
That makes sense, especially when lives could be at stake.
Exactly. And then there's competence. You want people who actually have the skills and knowledge to contribute to the community's well-being.
So it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Precisely. And there's one more quality that's often overlooked, but incredibly important. Renforcer le lien social really emphasizes the need for people who can stay calm under pressure.
Oh, that's a great point. Panicking never helps in a crisis.
Right. You need those steady individuals who can think clearly when things get chaotic. They can help prevent rash decisions and keep everyone grounded.
Okay, so we've got reliability, competence, and calmness under pressure. Those are some solid qualities to look for.
Absolutely. But building a community is about more than just finding the right people. Renforcer le lien social dives into the importance of building trust within the group.
So it's not just about assembling a team of skilled individuals. It's about creating those deeper bonds.
Right. Trust doesn't just happen. It takes time and effort and specific techniques to cultivate.
So what are some ways to build trust within a survivalist community?
Well, renforcer le lien social highlighted the importance of finding common ground. It's not just about agreeing on survival tactics. It's about identifying those shared values and goals that unite the community.
So maybe a commitment to self-reliance or sustainability or helping others.
Exactly. Those shared values are the foundation of the community. They foster unity and a spirit of collaboration.
But even with shared values, disagreements are bound to happen. How do you deal with those in a way that builds trust rather than breaking it down?
Renforcer le lien social really stress the importance of effective communication. It's about creating a safe space where people feel comfortable expressing their opinions and concerns, even if they disagree with others.
So it's about encouraging open and honest dialogue, making sure everyone feels heard and respected.
Absolutely. And it's not just about speaking. It's also about actively listening, trying to understand the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
I can see how that would be challenging, especially in a high-stress situation where emotions are running high.
It definitely takes effort. But those skills, open dialogue and active listening, are essential for building trust and resolving conflicts constructively.
So it's about creating an environment where disagreements are okay as long as they're handled respectfully and productively.
Exactly. It's about fostering a sense of mutual respect and understanding even amidst disagreements. And that's how you create a strong and resilient community.
Well, it sounds like we've covered a lot of ground already. From the importance of community to those essential roles, to the crucial elements of trust and communication, but there's still so much more to explore.
We've only just scratched the surface of this fascinating topic.
And on that note, we'll continue our deep dive into building a successful survivalist community after a quick break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about all those essential elements of building a successful survivalist community, especially a strong foundation of trust and communication. But one thing that really stuck with me from Piliers du Survivalism is the importance of specialization, like having people who are really experts in certain areas. It's not just about everyone being a jack of all trades.
You're right. Specialization allows for greater efficiency and effectiveness, especially when things hit the fan. Piliers du Survivalism really dives into these specialized roles, each contributing something unique to the whole community.
Okay, so paint me a picture here. What do these specialized roles actually look like in action? I remember the scout being mentioned in Piliers du Survivalism. Seems like a pretty vital role, right?
Absolutely. Imagine your scout venturing out beyond the community. They're the eyes and ears, constantly scanning for threats and searching for resources. Sharp eyes, a good sense of direction, able to move quietly through the wilderness.
So like a modern-day explorer, but with way higher stakes. And then there's the guardian, right? Piliers du Survivalism. Seem to put a lot of emphasis on that role, too. Makes sense. You need someone looking out for everyone's safety.
Exactly. The guardian is the protector, always vigilant and ready to defend the community. Think strong, alert, decisive, able to handle any threat that comes their way.
It's a big responsibility for sure, but a community also needs someone to take care of their health, right? I mean, what happens if someone gets injured or sick?
That's where the medic comes in. Piliers du Survivalism was very clear about the need for someone skilled in first aid, wound care, disease prevention. all those things that keep a community healthy and functioning.
So it's not just about patching up a cut or a scrape, it's about having that deeper medical knowledge and expertise.
Exactly. The medic is like the community's healer, someone who can treat physical ailments but also provide comfort and support in tough times.
Okay, scout, guardian, medic. Got it. But what about the people who build and create? I'm thinking of the artisan role that piliers du survivalisme mentioned. Seemed pretty interesting, but wouldn't everyone just be focused on basic survival in a crisis? Why is the artisan so important?
Great question. In a long-term survival situation, you need to be able to create and repair things. The artisan is the one who can take whatever's available and make it useful. Fashioning a water filter from natural materials, or fixing a broken tool with salvaged parts.
So when you can't just run to the store, the artisan becomes essential.
Exactly. They're the problem solvers, the ones who keep things running smoothly, even when the world as we know it has changed.
Okay, I'm starting to get how crucial that role is, but of course a community also needs to eat. How does comment bâtir une communauté de survie handle the issue of food?
Comment bâtir une communauté de survie stress the importance of the hunters and farmers. They're the ones providing food for the community. Hunting, fishing, foraging, growing crops.
It sounds like a pretty demanding job.
It is. They need to be adaptable and resourceful, knowing how to find food in all kinds of environments.
Imagine your hunters tracking game, setting traps, using their knowledge of the land to keep the community fed.
Exactly. And your farmers work in the land, experimenting with crops, preserving food for the long haul.
So it's a delicate balance between those two roles.
It really is. And it highlights a key point. All these roles are interconnected.
Yeah, I'm seeing that now. Like a well-oiled machine, each part is essential for the whole thing to work.
Precisely. Imagine the scout finds a new water source. The farmers use it to irrigate their crops, which then attracts game for the hunters, and the artisan repairs the tools everyone needs. It's a beautiful cycle.
Wow, that's incredible. But with everyone working on their specialized tasks, how do they stay connected? Piliers du survivalism was really big on communication being make or break for a community.
Absolutely. Communication is the glue that holds it all together. But you can't always rely on cell phones and the internet, especially long term.
So what happens when the grid goes down? What are some ways for the community to stay in touch?
Well, the article suggested a few things. For communication within the community, two-way radios are a popular choice.
Ah, the classic walkie-talkie. Always a good backup.
Definitely. Simple to use, relatively inexpensive, and they don't rely on any external infrastructure.
So you can coordinate tasks, share information, all without worrying about cell towers or internet connections.
Exactly. But for longer distances, piliers du survivalisme suggested things like signal flares and mirrors.
Okay, yeah, I can see how those would be useful for signaling for help or contacting other groups.
They can be surprisingly effective. Signal flares are bright enough to be seen for miles, especially at night. And a mirror can reflect sunlight and attract attention from far away.
Wow, that's amazing. It just goes to show that sometimes the simplest tools are the best.
Right. But if those visual signals aren't an option, you could use prearranged analog methods, things like sound signals or color codes.
So like a secret language just for your community? I like it.
Exactly. Reliable doesn't require batteries, and everyone knows what it means. It's all about having those backup systems in place.
That makes a lot of sense. But even with the best communication systems, building a strong community is about more than just practicality. It's also about that sense of belonging and shared identity.
You're so right. And that's where team-building activities come in. Comment bâtir une communauté de survie highlighted their importance. Creating shared experiences, the laughter, the challenges overcome together. It all strengthens those bonds.
It makes sense. If you're going to be relying on these people, you need to have more than just shared interests. You need real trust and camaraderie.
Absolutely. And Comment bâtir une communauté de survie had some really fun suggestions for team building. Remember how the scout needs to be good at navigation? Well, imagine putting those skills to the test with a game of capture the flag.
Oh man, that takes me back. It always seemed like just a game, but I can see how it could actually be good practice for a real life situation. You have to think strategically, communicate with your team, adapt to changing circumstances.
Exactly. And those skills are even more important in something like paintball.
Wait, paintball? How does that fit into survivalism?
You'd be surprised. It's a great way to practice tactical thinking, communication, quick decision-making, all under pressure.
So you're out there dodging paintballs, coordinating with your team, trying to outsmart your opponents? It's like a simulated survival scenario.
Precisely. And it's fun, too. It gets the adrenaline going and helps build those bonds within the group. But comment bâtir une communauté de survie Also recommended more traditional activities like camping.
I love camping. There's nothing like getting out into nature and disconnecting from everything.
Right. And it's a fantastic way to test your wilderness survival skills. You're building shelter, starting fires, cooking meals, navigating the terrain, all while working together as a team.
I can definitely see how that would build trust and camaraderie. You're relying on each other for support and learning from each other's strengths.
Exactly. And comment bâtir une communauté de survie was also big on formal training, like first aid and wilderness survival courses.
Yeah, those are essential. You can't just rely on instinct and intuition. You need a solid foundation of knowledge and skills.
Absolutely. Those courses give you the tools, and then those team-building activities give you a chance to put those tools into practice.
Okay, so we've got the specialized roles, the communication, the team building, but it seems like there's one more piece of the puzzle. That sense of shared vision and purpose. What is it that the community is working towards?
That's a great point. Renforcer le lien social really dives into that aspect. It's about creating a shared understanding of what the community stands for and what it hopes to achieve.
So it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving, about creating a future that aligns with the values of the community.
Exactly. And the article stressed the importance of identifying those core values that everyone in the group shares.
Things like self-reliance, sustainability, helping others, those fundamental principles that guide the community's decisions and actions.
Right. It's like a set of guiding principles, a shared foundation that everyone can agree on.
And that makes it easier to resolve disagreements and conflicts, right? Because even in the best communities, there are going to be differences of opinion.
Absolutely. But when you have that shared foundation of values, you can approach those disagreements from a place of understanding and respect. You can see them as opportunities for growth, rather than threats to the community.
That's a really good point. But even with shared values, effective communication is still key, right?
Absolutely. Renforcer le lien social was very clear about that communication is the key to building trust, resolving conflicts, and making sure the community functions smoothly.
So what are some ways to establish that kind of open and honest communication within a survivalist group?
Well, one of the most important things is to create a safe space where people feel comfortable expressing their opinions and concerns, even if they're different from what others think.
So it's about encouraging people to speak their minds without being afraid of judgment or criticism.
Exactly. But it's not just about speaking. It's also about listening, really listening, trying to understand the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with them.
That can be really tough, though, especially when you're in a high-stress situation.
It's definitely a skill. It takes practice. But open dialogue and active listening are so important for building trust and resolving conflicts in a healthy way.
It's about creating that culture of respect where everyone feels heard and valued, even if there are disagreements.
Exactly. But effective communication isn't just about those one-on-one interactions. It's also about having clear systems for decision-making and information sharing.
So like having a designated way to communicate important information or a clear chain of command for making decisions.
Exactly. Especially in an emergency situation, you need to be able to disseminate information quickly and efficiently.
It makes sense to have those structures in place beforehand so you're not scrambling to figure it out when a crisis hits.
Right. And those systems should be adaptable too, able to function, even if the usual methods of communication are unavailable.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Specialized roles, communication, shared values, trust building. It seems like we've touched on pretty much everything.
Yeah.
But there's one thing we haven't really talked about yet. Leadership.
Ah, yes. Leadership. The glue that holds it all together. The guiding force that helps the community navigate challenges and reach its goals.
Right. But who leads a survivalist community? Is it a specific role, or does it just kind of emerge organically? And what qualities make a good leader in that kind of situation?
Those are great questions. And the sources we've been looking at offer some interesting perspectives. Clés du survivalisme, for example, talked about the leader emerging from within the community, someone who helps guide decision-making and ensure everyone is working together.
Yeah.
But it didn't really specify how that leader is chosen or what kind of leadership style works best.
So it's possible that the leadership structure could evolve based on the people in the group and the specific challenges they face.
Exactly. And Renforcer le lien social offered some insights into the qualities that would likely be valued in a survivalist leader.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, remember those qualities we talked about earlier? Reliability, competence, calmness under pressure. Those are all essential for a good leader, too.
That makes sense. You'd want someone who's dependable, capable, and able to stay level-headed when things get tough.
Absolutely. But leadership is about more than just personal qualities. It's also about how you interact with others, how you motivate and guide them,
So it's not about barking orders or being authoritarian.
Nope. Renforcer le lien social. Emphasize the importance of communication for leaders, too. They need to be able to clearly explain the community's vision, delegate tasks effectively, and inspire others to work towards a common goal.
It's about empowering people, not controlling them.
Exactly. A good leader helps create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected and has a sense of ownership in the community's success.
But leadership also involves making tough decisions, right? The ones that might not be popular but are necessary for the group's survival.
Absolutely. A good leader needs to be able to weigh the options, assess the risks, and make those difficult calls, even when they might face pushback from others.
It's a heavy burden, but someone has to do it.
And a good leader understands that their decisions have consequences. They need to balance those competing priorities and always prioritize the long-term well-being of the community.
Okay, so we've talked about the practical side of leadership. But what about the emotional and psychological aspects? How do you maintain morale and hope in a survivalist community, especially when things are difficult?
That's a great question. Survival is not just about physical needs. It's also about mental and emotional well-being. A community that feels connected and hopeful is going to be much more resilient.
So how do you cultivate those positive emotions, especially when times are tough?
Comment bâtir une communauté de survie had some good suggestions. They talked about the importance of shared activities and rituals.
Things like communal meals, storytelling, music celebrations.
Exactly. Those activities create a sense of normalcy and connection. They remind people that they're not alone and that there's still joy to be found, even in the midst of hardship.
And renforcer le lien social also talked about the importance of maintaining a positive outlook, focusing on solutions instead of getting bogged down in problems.
Absolutely. It's about having that can-do attitude, believing that you can overcome challenges and create a better future.
So it's not about ignoring the difficulties. It's about choosing to focus on what you can control and what you can do to make things better.
Exactly. It's about empowering yourself and your community to take action and shape your own destiny.
It sounds like maintaining morale and hope in a survivalist community is all about nurturing those human connections, finding purpose, and choosing to see the light even in the darkest of times.
Beautifully said. It's about remembering that even when things are tough, there's still beauty and hope to be found. And that's what keeps us going.
Well, on that note, we're going to take another quick break to gather our thoughts. When we come back, we'll wrap up our exploration of building a successful survivalist community with some final reflections and key takeaways. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've covered a ton of ground on building a survivalist community, and it's clear it's not just about having all the gear and skills. You're so right. It's about the human side of things. The connections, the trust, the shared purpose. Those are what make a community truly strong.
And one thing that really struck me as we were going through these sources was the idea of starting now. Like, don't wait for a crisis to hit before you start building those connections.
Exactly. Renforcer le lien social was really big on that. It's much easier to establish those relationships and develop those skills when things are relatively stable.
Right. You don't want to be scrambling to find like-minded people when the world is falling apart.
It's about being proactive. Think of it like weaving a safety net before you need it.
And it's not just about finding hardcore preppers either, right? It's about connecting with your neighbors, your community members, anyone who might be an asset in a crisis.
Exactly. The more diverse your network, the better. Think about it. A mechanic, a doctor, a gardener. Those skills could be invaluable.
It's about recognizing that everyone has something to contribute.
And renforcer le lien social asks a really important question. How can you start building those connections right now, today?
It's a good question, isn't it? It's about taking those small steps, being intentional about your relationships.
It doesn't have to be anything drastic. Just start by reaching out to your neighbors. Get involved in your community. Offer your skills. It's all about building those bridges.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
And that brings us back to one of the key takeaways from your sources. Survival is not just about physical strength or having all the right stuff. It's about human connection.
It's about those bonds of trust and compassion and knowing that you're not alone.
And as we wrap up our deep dive into survivalist communities, I want to leave you with this thought. What's one small step you can take today to strengthen your own network of support?
It's something to think about, isn't it? Because ultimately, our ability to survive and thrive depends on our willingness to come together and help each other.
So stay curious, stay connected, and stay resilient.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into the things that spark your interest.